I watched the snow pile up against my heated walkway while sipping my morning coffee, and for the first time in 3 winters, I felt genuinely worried about what was coming next. The storm forecasters were predicting 18 inches by nightfall, and my radiant heating system, the one I'd spent $12,000 installing 2 years ago, was about to become the center of a battle I never asked for. My name is Franklin Peterson, and I've lived in Meadowbrook Estates in Boulder, Colorado for 8 years now. The neighborhood is one of those picture-perfect communities where every lawn looks manicured. Every house sits at exactly the right setback from the street, and everyone waves at each other with varying degrees of sincerity. I'm a civil engineer by trade, which means I take infrastructure seriously. When I bought this house, one of the first things I noticed was how treacherous the walkway became during winter storms. My mother has arthritis and visits frequently, so installing a heated walkway system wasn't just a luxury, it was a necessity. The system itself is beautiful in its simplicity. Tubes running beneath the concrete carry heated water that keeps the surface temperature just above freezing, melting snow and ice automatically. No shoveling, no salt, no chemicals damaging the concrete or burning the grass. Just clear, safe pavement. I'd pulled all the permits, had it inspected, and even had the electrical work done by a licensed contractor. Everything was completely above board. That morning, as I stood at my window watching the first flakes fall, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not with the storm rolling in. When I opened the door, I found myself face to face with Deborah Mitchell, the president of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. Deborah was 53, wore her blonde hair in that specific style that somehow screamed, "I need to speak to your manager," and had a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Franklin, good morning," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "Just having coffee before the storm hits," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. I'd learned over the years that any interaction with Deborah required careful navigation. "What can I do for you?" She pulled a folder from under her arm, protecting it from the falling snow. "I'm here on official HOA business, I'm afraid. May I come in?" Every instinct told me to say no, but it was cold, and I didn't want to have this conversation on my doorstep where the neighbors could watch. I stepped aside and let her in, noting how she immediately scanned my entryway as if looking for violations. "I'll get right to the point," Deborah said, not bothering to sit when I gestured toward the living room. "The HOA board has voted to prohibit the use of heated walkway systems within the community, effective immediately." I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your heated walkway," she said, enunciating each word slowly as if I were simple. "It needs to be turned off. The board has determined it poses several concerns." "What concerns?" I felt my jaw tightening. "The system is fully permitted, inspected, and has been operating perfectly for 2 years. What possible concerns could there be?" Deborah opened her folder and pulled out a printed document. "First, there's the issue of energy consumption. Your system uses considerably more electricity than a standard home, which doesn't align with our community's commitment to environmental responsibility." "I have solar panels," I interrupted. "I generate more power than I use annually." "This is documented with the utility company." She continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Second, there's the aesthetic concern. The fact that your walkway remains clear while your neighbors are shoveling creates an inconsistency in the neighborhood's appearance." I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped. "You're telling me that having a safe, clear walkway is an aesthetic problem? That's insane." Her expression hardened. "Please don't take that tone with me, Franklin. The board has made its decision." Additionally, we've received complaints from neighbors that the runoff from your melting snow is affecting their properties. The runoff goes exactly where all the snow from everyone's walkways goes, into the storm drains. I engineered the grading myself. Nevertheless, Deborah said, her voice taking on a sharp edge, the board has voted, and as per Section 7, Paragraph 3 of the HOA bylaws, we have the authority to regulate external home modifications that affect the community. Your heated walkway system must be deactivated immediately, and it must remain off for the duration of winter weather events. I took a deep breath, trying to control my anger. Deborah, there's a major storm coming. My mother is visiting tomorrow. She has severe arthritis and uses a walker. If my walkway is covered in ice, she could seriously hurt herself. Then I suggest you shovel like everyone else, Deborah replied coolly. The fine for non-compliance is $200 per day, and if you continue to operate the system after receiving this notice, the board will pursue legal action. You have until noon today to comply. She handed me the folder and walked toward the door. I stood there, holding the paperwork, feeling my blood pressure rising. This is ridiculous, I said to her back. I'm going to fight this. Deborah turned, and for the first time her fake smile disappeared entirely. You can try, Franklin, but the bylaws are clear and the board stands united. Noon today. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. After she left, I immediately called my lawyer, Richard Chen. We'd worked together on my business contracts, and he'd helped me review the HOA bylaws when I first moved in. His secretary told me he was in court but would call me back. I spent the next hour reading through every page of the HOA bylaws, looking for anything that could possibly support Deborah's claim. Section 7. Paragraph 3 did indeed grant the board authority over external modifications, but it specifically stated that permitted and legal modifications were grandfathered in unless they posed a safety hazard or violated local ordinances. My heated walkway was permitted, legal, and safe. The board didn't have a leg to stand on. Richard called me back around 10:30. I explained the situation, and I could hear him typing as I spoke. They're bluffing, he said finally. They have no authority to force you to disable a permitted system, especially one that's been operating without incident for 2 years. The bylaws are clear on this. Even if they wanted to change the rules going forward, they'd need to amend the bylaws, which requires a full community vote, not just a board decision. So I can ignore them. Legally, yes. But Franklin, you know how these HOA disputes go. They'll fine you, you'll fight the fines, it'll get messy. Are you prepared for that fight? I looked out at my walkway, watching the snow begin to accumulate on the unheated portions. My mother arrives tomorrow morning at 7. I'm not letting her risk a broken hip because Deborah Mitchell is on a power trip. Then keep it on, Richard said. I'll draft a letter explaining why their order is invalid, but be prepared for them to escalate. Let them, I replied. The storm intensified throughout the day. By 3 in the afternoon, we had 8 inches on the ground, and it showed no signs of stopping. My heated walkway remained perfectly clear, a dark ribbon of safe concrete surrounded by white. I noticed several neighbors walking past, some looking curious, others looking annoyed. Around 5, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Peterson, this is Gary Hoffman from down the street. I'm on the HOA board. What can I do for you, Gary? Listen, I want to apologize for how Deborah handled this morning. Some of us on the board weren't entirely comfortable with the approach, but she pushed it through. So you're saying the board isn't actually united? There was a long pause. I'm saying that Deborah has a specific way of getting what she wants. Look, She's been trying to target you ever since you opposed her proposal to repave the community streets last year. This heated walkway thing, it's personal for her." I remembered that battle. Deborah had wanted to assess every homeowner $3,000 for street repaving that wasn't needed. I'd organized the opposition, gathered engineering reports showing the streets were fine, and her proposal had been voted down. I'd embarrassed her in front of the community. "So this is retaliation," I said. "I'm not saying that officially," Gary replied carefully. "I'm just saying that maybe if you talked to her, found some kind of compromise, this could all go away. Gary, I appreciate the call, but I'm not turning off my heated walkway during a major storm. It's safe, it's legal, and I have a right to use my own property as I see fit within the law. I understand. I just wanted you to know that not everyone on the board agrees with this." After he hung up, I stood at my window and watched the snow fall. The neighborhood was transforming into a winter wonderland, and despite the stress of the day, it was beautiful. My neighbor directly across the street, Tom Brennan, was out shoveling his walkway for the second time, fighting a losing battle against the accumulation. He saw me watching and waved. I waved back, wondering if he was one of the neighbors who'd complained. My mother called at 6 to confirm her flight was still scheduled to arrive on time the next morning. "The pilot says we should be landing before the worst of it," she said. "Are you sure you don't want me to reschedule?" "Mom, I've got the guest room ready, the walkway will be clear, and I've been looking forward to your visit for weeks. Don't cancel on me now. You're sure the walkway will be safe? I don't want to be a burden. I promise it'll be the safest walkway in Colorado." That night I barely slept. The wind howled, rattling my windows, and I kept getting up to check on the system. Everything was working perfectly. The walkway remained clear while snow piled up everywhere else. Around 2 in the morning, I saw flashlights outside. When I looked out, I saw Deborah and another man I didn't recognize walking around my property, taking pictures of my heated walkway. I grabbed my phone and took pictures of them from my window. If they wanted to play games, I'd document everything. The next morning, I woke to find 16 inches of snow on the ground and a citation from the HOA taped to my front door. The fine was $200 for the first day of non-compliance, with an additional notice that my case would be referred to the HOA's legal counsel. I photographed the citation and sent it to Richard along with the pictures of Deborah prowling around my property at 2 in the morning. At 6:30, I cleared my car and headed to Denver International Airport to pick up my mother. The roads were challenging but passable, and I made it to the airport by 7:15. Mom looked tired from her flight but smiled when she saw me. "There's my boy," she said, hugging me carefully. Her movements were stiff, and I could see the effort it took her to walk even with her walker. "How are you feeling?" "Old and creaky," she laughed. "But seeing you makes it worth the trip." The drive back to Boulder took twice as long as usual. The plows were out in force, but the snow was still winning. When we finally pulled onto my street, Mom noticed my walkway immediately. "Franklin, your walkway is completely clear. How did you manage that?" "That's actually a story," I said, helping her out of the car. "Let's get you inside and warm first." I helped her navigate from the driveway to my front door, grateful for every dollar I'd spent on that heating system. She didn't slip once, didn't struggle with uneven snow or hidden ice. It was exactly what I'd installed it for. After I got her settled with tea and breakfast, I explained the situation with the HOA. Mom's expression darkened as I talked. "That's absolutely ridiculous," she said when I finished. "You installed this for safety and it's working perfectly. What kind of person would try to force you to turn it off during a storm?" "The kind who holds grudges," I replied. "Well, I hope you're fighting this. With everything I've got." Around 10 that morning, my doorbell rang again. This time it was a Boulder County Sheriff's deputy. My stomach dropped. "Franklin Peterson?" he asked. "That's me. I'm Deputy Marshal. I'm here regarding a complaint filed by your homeowners association. May I come in?" This was escalating faster than I'd anticipated. I let him in, and he pulled out a notebook. "The HOA president, a Miss Mitchell, claims you're operating electrical equipment in violation of a community safety order. She's asking us to verify the situation." I took a deep breath. "Deputy, I'm operating a heated walkway system that's fully permitted by Boulder County, has been inspected and approved, and has been functioning safely for 2 years. The HOA is attempting to force me to disable it because the president has a personal vendetta against me." "Do you have documentation of the permits?" "Absolutely." I grabbed the folder I'd prepared and showed him everything: the original permits, the inspection certificates, the electrical contractor's license and work order, even my solar panel installation documents. Deputy Marshal looked through everything carefully. "And the HOA is claiming this is a safety issue. They're claiming several things, all of which are baseless. My lawyer has already informed them that their order has no legal standing." The deputy nodded slowly. "Mr. Peterson, I can't get involved in a civil dispute between you and your HOA. What I can tell you is that based on these documents, you're not violating any county ordinances or safety codes. If the HOA wants to pursue this, it needs to be through civil channels, not criminal ones. Can you tell Miss Mitchell that? I'll make it clear in my report that there's no criminal issue here. Beyond that, you'll need to handle this through the courts or HOA procedures." After the deputy left, I called Richard again. "They called the sheriff on me." "That was foolish of them," Richard said. "Now we have an official report stating you're in compliance with all actual laws. That strengthens your position. How's your mother doing? She's safe inside, which is the whole point of this system." "Good. I've drafted the response letter. I'm going to hand-deliver it to Deborah Mitchell this afternoon. In the meantime, document everything. Every fine notice, every interaction, every piece of harassment. We're building a case." Mom stayed with me for 4 days, and during that time, the HOA sent 3 more citation notices. The fines totaled $800. I didn't pay any of them. Richard's letter to Deborah had been comprehensive, citing specific bylaws and Colorado state law regarding HOA authority limits, but she hadn't responded. On the day I took Mom back to the airport, she squeezed my hand. "Don't let them bully you, Franklin. You did the right thing installing that system, and you're doing the right thing fighting for it." "I won't, Mom. I promise." 2 days after Mom left, I received a letter from the HOA's lawyer demanding immediate payment of all fines plus a $300 administrative fee, and threatening to place a lien on my property if I didn't comply within 10 days. Richard filed a response and a counter-complaint, arguing that the HOA had overstepped its authority and engaged in targeted harassment. The dispute dragged on for 3 weeks. During that time, I noticed something interesting. My water bill had been unusually low for months, but I'd attributed it to my efficient appliances and water-wise landscaping. One evening, while reviewing my utility records for the HOA case, I noticed that my water usage had actually decreased significantly right around the time the HOA had done extensive landscaping work in the common areas. That struck me as odd. I'd been home the entire time, my usage patterns hadn't changed, yet my consumption had dropped by almost 30%. Being an engineer, I decided to investigate. I checked my main water meter, and the numbers were spinning much faster than they should be for my household usage. Someone was using water through my line. I turned off all my internal water, every faucet, toilet, appliance, everything. The meter kept spinning. My heart rate picked up. Someone was tapped into my water line illegally. I went outside and started tracing my supply line where it came into my property from the street. About 20 feet from my meter, still on my property, I found it. A connection point where someone had tapped into my main line. The work was recent, professional, and completely illegal. I followed the branch line. It ran underground along my property boundary and then crossed into the HOA common area, where it fed directly into the irrigation system for the community landscaping. The HOA had illegally connected to my water supply. I stood there in the late afternoon sun, staring at the connection, and everything clicked into place. This explained why my bill had gone down right after the landscaping work. The HOA had installed a tap before my meter, meaning they were stealing water from the municipal supply, but it was being delivered through my property line. The water company would hold me responsible for the loss. I immediately called the water department and reported the illegal tap. They sent an inspector out within 2 hours. His name was Martin Hayes, and he was not happy about what he found. "This is a serious violation," Martin said, photographing everything. "This tap is pulling water before your meter, which means you're not being charged for it, but the water company is losing revenue. Plus, it's creating a cross-connection risk. Do you know who installed this?" "I have a pretty good idea," I said. "The HOA did major irrigation work about 6 months ago. That's when my usage patterns changed." Martin made notes. "We'll need to investigate further, but if the HOA authorized this, they're looking at significant fines and potential criminal charges for water theft. We're talking tens of thousands of gallons over 6 months. What do I need to do?" "Nothing right now. Don't touch the connection. We'll handle it from here. You'll need to provide written testimony about what you found and when. We'll contact the HOA directly." "They're already in a legal dispute with me," I said. "This is going to get complicated." Martin looked at me seriously. "Mr. Peterson, someone committed water theft and created an illegal connection that could compromise water quality for the neighborhood. That's a criminal matter, not a civil dispute. This just got very simple, actually." I called Richard immediately after Martin left. "You're not going to believe this." After I explained what I'd found, Richard was quiet for a long moment. "Franklin, this changes everything. If the HOA knowingly tapped into your water line illegally, they've committed a crime. Plus, they've been fining you and harassing you while actively stealing utilities from you. A judge is going to have a field day with this. What should I do?" "Exactly what you're doing. Cooperate fully with the water department. Document everything. And don't, under any circumstances, mention this to Deborah or anyone else on the HOA board. Let them find out when the water department comes knocking." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the sheer audacity of what the HOA had done. They'd illegally tapped my water line, then had the nerve to harass me about my heated walkway. The hypocrisy was staggering. The next morning, I watched from my window as 2 water department trucks and a Boulder police car pulled up to the HOA office building. 4 officials went inside. They were there for over an hour. When they came out, Deborah was with them, and her face was bright red. I couldn't hear what was being said, but her body language was furious. That afternoon, I received a call from Martin at the water department. "Mr. Peterson, I wanted to update you on our investigation. We've confirmed that the illegal tap was installed by a contractor hired by the HOA. We've also calculated that approximately 47,000 gallons of water have been stolen over the past 6 months. The HOA will be facing fines, and we've referred the case to the district attorney's office for possible criminal charges." What happens now? The connection will be permanently removed tomorrow. The HOA will need to properly meter and pay for their irrigation water going forward. And you may want to consult with your attorney about the leverage this gives you in your existing dispute. 20 minutes after I hung up with Martin, Deborah called me. I let it go to voicemail. She called again and again. On the fourth call, I answered. "What can I do for you, Deborah? You called the water department on us." Her voice was shaking with rage. "I discovered an illegal tap on my water line and reported it, as required by law. What did you expect me to do? That's HOA property. You had no right to interfere with community infrastructure. Deborah, you tapped into my water supply line without permission. That's theft. It's also potentially a felony. The fact that you're trying to justify it is absolutely mind-blowing. We're going to sue you for harassment and for interfering with HOA operations." "Go ahead," I said calmly. "I look forward to explaining to a judge how reporting a crime is harassment. While we're at it, we can discuss how you've been fining me illegally for using my permitted heated walkway." She sputtered for a moment, then hung up on me. Richard called me an hour later, laughing. "I just got a call from the HOA's lawyer. They want to settle. They'll drop all fines and acknowledge your right to use the heated walkway if you agree not to pursue civil damages for the water theft." "What did you tell them?" "I told them I'd discuss it with my client, but that given the criminal investigation, any settlement would need to be much more comprehensive. Franklin, you've got them cornered. They know they're in serious trouble." "I want more than just dropping the fines," I said. "I want Deborah removed from the board. That might be difficult to enforce in a settlement agreement. Then I want a vote of no confidence scheduled, and I want the HOA to pay for an independent audit of all their financial decisions for the past 2 years. If they stole water from me, what else have they done? Now you're thinking strategically. Let me work on this." Over the next week, the situation spiraled for the HOA. The water department's investigation revealed that Deborah had approved the illegal tap herself, overriding concerns raised by the contractor who'd installed it. The contractor, trying to avoid liability, had provided emails showing that Deborah had insisted the tap was legal and authorized. Those emails proved she'd knowingly committed water theft. The district attorney charged Deborah with theft of utilities, a Class 2 misdemeanor in Colorado. If convicted, she could face up to a year in jail and significant fines. The HOA board held an emergency meeting and voted to remove her as president pending the outcome of the criminal case. Gary Hoffman called me personally to apologize. "Franklin, I want you to know that most of the board had no idea about the water tap. Deborah handled the irrigation project herself, told us she'd worked out a cost-saving measure. We never questioned it. We should have. Gary, I appreciate that, but the board still went along with her campaign against my heated walkway. That wasn't just Deborah." "You're right," he said quietly. "She was persuasive, and some of us went along without thinking it through. For what it's worth, the board voted unanimously to rescind all fines against you and to formally acknowledge that your heated walkway is permitted and acceptable under HOA rules." "What about the audit?" "We've hired an independent firm. The results will be shared with all homeowners. If there are other issues, we'll address them." The audit, when it came back 3 weeks later, was damning. Deborah had been systematically inflating quotes for community work, taking kickbacks from contractors, and misappropriating HOA funds for personal expenses. The total came to over $60,000. The HOA filed a civil suit to recover the funds, and the district attorney added felony theft charges to Deborah's growing legal problems. Meanwhile, Richard negotiated a settlement for me. The HOA paid me $12,000 to cover my legal fees and as compensation for the harassment. They also paid the water department's investigation costs and the fines for the illegal tap. More importantly, they amended the HOA bylaws to include specific protections for permitted home improvements and created an appeals process for homeowner disputes. The criminal case against Deborah took months to wind through the court system. I had to testify twice, once about the water theft and once about the pattern of harassment. The prosecution used the heated walkway dispute to establish that Deborah had targeted me specifically, which went to her state of mind and intent regarding the illegal water connection. In the end, Deborah pleaded guilty to 1 count of felony theft for the embezzlement and 1 count of misdemeanor theft of utilities. She was sentenced to 18 months in prison, 3 years of probation, and ordered to pay full restitution to both the HOA and the water department. The judge was particularly harsh during sentencing, noting that Deborah had abused a position of trust within her community. "You were elected to serve your neighbors," the judge said, "and instead, you used your position to settle personal grudges and enrich yourself." This kind of betrayal of community trust strikes at the heart of what makes neighborhoods function. I attended the sentencing hearing. Deborah didn't look at me once. The following winter, when the first snow fell, I stood at my window with a cup of coffee and watched my heated walkway do its job. The system hummed along quietly, keeping the concrete clear and safe. My mother was planning another visit, and I knew she'd be able to walk from my car to my front door without fear. Tom Brennan from across the street called me the next day. "Hey Franklin, I've been thinking about installing one of those heated walkway systems. Who did yours? I'll send you the contractor's information," I said. "Fair warning though, it's not cheap. After watching you go through hell over yours and seeing how well it works, I figure it's worth it." Besides, the new HOA board already said they're fine with it, right? They did. Turns out following the law and respecting property rights makes everything simpler. More neighbors asked about the system over the following months. By the next winter, 3 other houses on my street had installed their own heated walkways. The HOA didn't say a word about any of them. Gary Hoffman, who'd become the new HOA president, stopped by one afternoon to chat. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "What you did, standing up to Deborah, it exposed a lot of problems we didn't know existed. The community is better off now." "I wasn't trying to be a hero," I replied. "I just wanted to keep my walkway on. Sometimes standing up for something small leads to fixing something big," Gary said. "The audit revealed so much corruption, and now we've got real oversight and accountability. That wouldn't have happened if you just backed down." "What about the irrigation system? Did you get it properly connected?" "We did. We're paying for our own water now, like we should have been all along. It increased our annual costs, but we adjusted the budget." The funny thing is, Deborah always complained about expenses, but she was the one driving them up with her kickback schemes. After Gary left, I thought about everything that had happened. It had started with such a simple thing, wanting to keep my mother safe during winter visits. That basic desire for safety had led to discovering crime, exposing corruption, and ultimately making the entire community better governed. The legal bills had been substantial, even with the settlement money. The stress had taken its toll, but every time I looked at my clear walkway during a storm, I knew it had been worth it. This was my home, my property, and I had a right to maintain it safely and legally. Standing up for that right had mattered. Richard and I celebrated with dinner once everything was finally resolved. "You know," he said over steaks, "most people would have just turned off the walkway. They wouldn't have wanted the fight." "I'm not most people," I replied. And it wasn't just about the walkway. It was about principle. Deborah was wrong. She was abusing her power and someone needed to push back. Well, you certainly did that. Though I don't recommend finding illegal water taps as a legal strategy. That was pure luck. Engineering curiosity, I corrected. I saw something that didn't make sense with my water bills and I investigated. That's not luck, that's just paying attention. Fair enough. Here's to paying attention. We clinked glasses. The following spring, the HOA held elections for the full board. Several new members joined, all of them committed to transparency and following proper procedures. The community meetings, which had been sparsely attended during Deborah's tenure, now regularly drew 30 or 40 homeowners. People were engaged, asking questions, reviewing budgets, and actually participating in community governance. I even joined the Architectural Review Committee, the group that evaluated proposed home modifications. My first act was to help draft clear guidelines about what was and wasn't permitted, complete with an expedited approval process for common upgrades like heated walkways, solar panels, and energy-efficient improvements. The old system was designed to give the board maximum control, I explained at the meeting where we presented the new guidelines. This new system is designed to give homeowners maximum freedom within reasonable community standards. We should be making it easier to improve our homes, not harder. The guidelines passed unanimously. My mother visited again that spring and we sat on my back deck enjoying the mountain views. "You seem more relaxed," she said, "less angry about everything." "It's over," I replied. "Justice was served, changes were made, and life goes on." "I'm proud of you for fighting," she said. "A lot of people would have just given up. You raised me not to back down when I'm right. I did, though I also raised you to pick your battles wisely." "This was a wise battle, Mom. It needed to be fought." She smiled and patted my hand. "I know, dear. I'm just glad you won." That summer, I ran into Deborah's husband, Marcus, at the grocery store. He looked exhausted and embarrassed. I considered avoiding him, but he'd always been decent to me, and this wasn't his fault. "Franklin," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology." "Marcus, you don't owe me anything. This wasn't your doing." I knew she was obsessed with getting back at you. I should have said something, tried harder to talk her down. I never imagined she'd go this far. "How is she?" "Adjusting to prison, I guess. We're separated now." "I'm filing for divorce once her sentence is up. I can't be married to someone who did what she did." "I'm sorry it came to this." "Don't be. She made her choices. She hurt a lot of people, including me. You just refuse to be another victim." He hesitated, then added, "Your heated walkway, it works really well, doesn't it?" "It does." "Deborah always hated that she couldn't control you. That's what this was really about, control." After he walked away, I stood in the produce section thinking about his words. He was right. The heated walkway had just been an excuse. Deborah had wanted to reassert dominance after I'd successfully opposed her street repaving scheme. When I wouldn't submit, she'd escalated. And in escalating, she'd destroyed herself. There was a lesson in there about power, about hubris, about what happens when people prioritize control over community. I'd been lucky. My engineering background had given me the knowledge to investigate the water issue. My financial situation had allowed me to hire a good lawyer. Not everyone would have those advantages. That realization led me to volunteer with a local tenants' rights organization. If I could use my skills and resources to help others facing similar situations, whether with HOAs or landlords or other power imbalances, then maybe some good could come from the whole mess. The following winter arrived with another major storm. This time, I invited several neighbors over to watch the Broncos game during the snowfall. We stood at my window at halftime, watching the heated walkway keep itself clear while snow piled up everywhere else. "It's still kind of magical," Tom said. He'd installed his own system by then, and he was just as pleased with it as I was with mine. "Just watching the snow melt as it lands. Engineering magic," I replied. "The best kind. Did you ever imagine all this would come from installing a heated walkway?" Asked Susan Chen, who lived 3 doors down. "Not in a million years. I just wanted my mom to be safe." "Well, you did that. Plus you cleaned up our HOA, got rid of a criminal, and made it easier for the rest of us to improve our homes. Not bad for a winter project." We all laughed, clinked our beer bottles together, and went back to watching the game. Later that night, after everyone had left and I was cleaning up, I stood at that same window and looked out at my clear walkway. The snow was still falling, heavy and beautiful. Tomorrow morning, I'd wake up to a winter wonderland and my walkway would be clear and safe. Just as it should be. I thought about everything that had happened over the past 2 years. The harassment, the legal battles, the discovery of the water theft, the criminal prosecution, the reforms to the HOA. It had been exhausting and stressful and expensive. But it had also been necessary. Sometimes standing up for yourself leads to standing up for others. Sometimes fighting for a small right exposes larger wrongs. Sometimes the things we think are endings are actually beginnings. My heated walkway had been a safety feature. It had become a battleground. And ultimately, it had been a catalyst for real change in my community. Not because I'd set out to change anything, but because I'd refused to accept unjust treatment. That refusal had mattered. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, I felt genuinely content for the first time in years. My home was truly mine. My community was better governed. Justice had been served, and my mother could visit safely whenever she wanted. Sometimes that's all you can ask for. And sometimes it's more than enough. The next morning, I woke to 18 inches of fresh snow and a crystal-clear walkway. I made coffee, stood at my usual spot by the window, and smiled. This was exactly what I'd paid for. This was exactly what I'd fought for, and it had been absolutely, completely worth it. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Another storm in Boulder. Is your walkway clear?" I took a picture of the pristine concrete surrounded by snow and sent it to her with a simple reply. "Always." She responded with a smiley face and a message. "Planning to visit next month. Save me the guest room. It's already yours." I typed back, and it was. The guest room, the walkway, the house, the peace of mind, all of it was secure now. Not because someone in power had granted me permission, but because I'd stood up for my rights and refused to back down when those rights were challenged. That's what home really means. Not just the physical structure, but the freedom and security to live in it on your own terms within the law, without fear of arbitrary punishment or retaliation. I had that now, and I'd never take it for granted again. The sun came out around noon, making the snow sparkle like diamonds. My heated walkway continued its quiet work, maintaining safety through engineering rather than effort. Neighbors walked past, some stopping to chat, others just waving. The community had been through something together, and we'd come out better for it. That evening, I received an email from the new HOA board. They were organizing a community appreciation event for spring, and they wanted to recognize several homeowners who'd contributed to improving the neighborhood. My name was on the list. I almost declined. I hadn't fought Deborah for recognition or praise. But then I thought about the message it would send to other homeowners. Standing up for yourself matters, and the community values people who do the right thing even when it's hard. I accepted the recognition. 3 months later, at the community event, Gary Hoffman presented me with a plaque thanking me for dedication to community integrity and homeowner rights. The applause was genuine and warm. Several people came up afterward to shake my hand and thank me personally. "You gave the rest of us courage," one woman said. "I've been fighting the HOA over my satellite dish for a year. After seeing what you went through, I decided to stand my ground. They backed down last week." "Good," I replied. "That's exactly how it should work." As I drove home that evening with the plaque in my passenger seat, I reflected on the entire journey. It had started with a simple desire to keep my mother safe. It had evolved into a battle over rights and principles. And it had ended with a corrupt official in prison, a reformed community association, and a neighborhood that better understood the importance of following rules and respecting rights. My heated walkway had been the catalyst, but the real story was about standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult, expensive, and stressful. That willingness to fight when necessary, that's what made the difference. I pulled into my driveway and looked at my walkway. No snow this time, just plain concrete in the spring evening light. But I knew what it could do when winter came. I knew it would keep my mother safe, keep me safe, keep anyone who visited safe. And I knew that no one would ever again try to take that safety away through abuse of power. That knowledge, that security, that confidence in my rights as a homeowner, that was the real victory. The rest was just details. I took the plaque inside, found a spot for it on my office wall, and stepped back to look at it. The words were nice, but they weren't why I'd fought. I'd fought because it was necessary, because someone had to, because standing up to injustice is always the right choice. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. That night I slept better than I had in years. My home was mine. My rights were secure. My community was better. And when winter came again, my heated walkway would be ready, keeping the path clear and safe, just as it was always meant to do. Sometimes, the smallest things represent the biggest principles. A heated walkway isn't just heated concrete, it's safety, it's independence. It's the right to make reasonable choices about your own property. Fighting for it wasn't stubbornness, it was standing up for the foundation of homeownership itself. I'd learned a lot through this experience. I'd learned that HOAs can be vehicles for both community improvement and individual tyranny. I'd learned that corruption often hides behind claims of authority. I'd learned that sometimes the fight you don't want is the fight you need to have. And I'd learned that standing up for yourself can inspire others to do the same. Most importantly, I'd learned that home is worth fighting for. Not just the building, but everything it represents. Security, freedom, safety, and the right to live your life on your own terms within the bounds of law and reason. My heated walkway would run for many winters to come. And every time it cleared the snow, it would remind me of what I'd fought for and why it mattered. That was worth more than any amount of money or convenience. That was worth everything.